Numerical problem solving, remember, is about going through the question and getting all the information that you can get. Right, so the first number I come across here is this 2 meters. Oh, sorry, wrong mode. 2 meters, and that tells me that is the wavelength. So in my problem solving, in my list of variables, I'm going to write lambda equals 2 meters. And then it tells me it takes a time of 24 seconds. Now that's not a special time, it's not a period, it's just a time. It's a time for the waves to travel the length of the swimming pool. But the other thing you've got to see in this question is that sometimes the information's on the diagram. So what I have is a length of the swimming pool on the diagram. Now what am I going to call that? Well, I could call it L for length, but L doesn't appear in any of my equations. Is it a wavelength? Yeah, it's a distance that the wavelength that the wave travels, isn't it? Because it tells us that the wave travels the length of the swimming pool. So it's the distance rather than the length of one individual wave. So in terms of my problem solving method, that's what I want to do, make sure I write down everything I've got in the question. So I've got a lambda, I've got a t, I've got a d. And then when I look at part A, well, part A is asking me the speed. So now I can put v equals a question mark. We've got two equations for speed, but so this is part of your problem solving method, is choosing the correct equation for speed. If I look at the two equations we've got for speed that we've learned are v equals f lambda that we just learned this week. And before the holiday we learned d equals vt. Right? Or even you learned that back in first year speed distance time. Now notice it's not a v equals something formula, but as long as it's got v in it somewhere, I can use it to solve for v. Okay? So the formula I'm going to use is d equals vt because it's got the v in it that I'm trying to solve for, and I know d and I know t. So that's why I know to select that formula. If I was trying to do it with v equals f lambda, I don't have the frequency of the wave. It doesn't tell me that in the question. And as a wee hint, can you see in part B, it's asking me the frequency. So obviously I don't know the frequency. So that's why I can't use v equals f lambda. So that's part of the problem solving, is selecting the right formula. But then once you've done that, it's now a substitution thing. So I put my d is 36, my v I leave as a v, and I've got a times t, so that's times 24. And then you can go through your problem solving methods, swap sides, the arithmetic really, divide both sides by 24, and then you can get your calculator out and do the calculation. I think that's right if somebody's done the calculation, and that's my final answer. Another good thing I should have mentioned yesterday, it's a good idea to underline your final answer to make it clear to the marker. Does that make sense? Can you see that it's based on formulas you already know, but the key there is actually your problem solving method. So it's not that the physics you're doing is any more difficult than what you've already done. So I listed what I knew, what I was being asked. And then similarly for part B, I'm going to do B over here just to give me a bit of space. I'm being asked the frequency in part B. So what equations do I have for frequency? Well, actually I have two. We're going to revise another one, but the one we're going to use, that we've been using this week, is V equals F lambda. And I've got V, I've got lambda, so that enables me to work out F. So I'm using my V from part A, so that's one thing to remember. When you get to part B, you know the answer to part A, hopefully, okay? And even if you really struggled with part A, you should always assume an answer. So even if you don't know how to do part A, just write down V equals 6. Pick a number, doesn't really matter. And then use that number to solve for B, because you can still get full marks for part B, right? Even if you got part A wrong. So we substitute in V equals F times 2, right? Lambda's 2. Once again, for arithmetic, like I say, if you want to skip some of these arithmetic mistakes because your arithmetic is good, that's fine. But if you do have a tendency of making careless mistakes, then don't skip these steps. Or if you're not so sure about what's happening. So remember what I'm doing there is swapping both sides over to get F on the left. And then I'm doing the opposite. So if it's times 2, I'm doing divide by 2 to get rid of that. That leaves me F, and then I get a calculator out and do 1.5 divided by 2, if you really need a calculator for that. And don't forget to add in the units as well as hertz.